Good evening. It is 6 o'clock. I'm Greg Parrish, President of the Forney ISD Board of Trustees. Hereby call this Forney ISD Board of Trustees meeting to order. Certify that the quorum is present, that the meeting has been posted in the time and manner required by law. Monthly meetings are open to the public. Although the meeting is public, comments and questions from the audience will be confined to the time designated for citizens to address the board. Again, thank you for joining us here tonight. This time, we'll take number 14 out of order, and the board will convene into closed session.
If you do not have a seat, we do have some overflow rooms. You can step out the hallway and the officers will show you where the overflow room is. I appreciate your cooperation with our social distancing, but feel free to step out there and they'll show you where some extra seats are. And then we'll have a recess in a little bit, and those of you that need to leave can, and some that are overflow can come in here. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Good evening once again. I'm Greg Parrish, President of the Board of Trustees of Forney ISD. We started with item number 1 earlier. Now we'll pick up with number 2, which is our roll call and declaration of a quorum. It is now 7:01 p.m. We'll reconvene back into regular session. Moving on to item number 3 on our agenda. This evening we have Father Patrick with us. Father Patrick joined the Forney family recently as the priest of St. Martin of Tours Catholic Church. Father Patrick was ordained into the priesthood in 2002 for the Archdiocese of Ibadan, Nigeria. In 2007, he was sent on a mission to the Diocese of Dallas. In his 13 years in the diocese, he has served at St. Anne's in Coppell, St. Jude in Allen, and St. Pius in Dallas. He loves soccer, hockey, basketball, and especially the Mavericks. Well, I hope you like the Mavericks. They didn't make it to the finals. With his free time, he also preoccupies himself with fishing and gardening. St. Martin has been instrumental in providing our students and families with support during COVID-19 pandemic. They continue to host a monthly food truck on the first Saturday of every month to support families in need. We're thankful to have St. Martin and Father Patrick as a valuable member of our Forney family. So at this time, Father Patrick, if you make your way over to the podium, we'll all rise for our opening prayer.
Almighty Father, you created us for unity and love. In your kindness, you wish that we dwell together as a community. Lord, we gather to grow our community at Forney. We rely on your strength and support to be one family. And so, Lord, we pray like St. Paul, that whatever is true, just, pure, lovely, excellent, and worthy of praise, we may individually and collectively embrace to build a united city of Forney. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Father Patrick. You may be seated. This time we'll move on to our pledges, and this evening I would like to introduce Dr. Donahue, principal of Ray Intermediate School, to introduce our secondary student of the month, followed by Ms. Harstrom, principal of Lewis Elementary, to introduce our elementary student of the month. So, ladies.
Make sure she's 6 feet away before I speak. All right, I'm so excited to introduce Kaylee Sanders. Kaylee Sanders is our student of the month. She's been at Ray since she was itty bitty, so it's exciting to see her grow up into such a sweet young lady. She is her parents are John and Chris Bomer, on our front row, and she's the little sister to Kimberlyn, who used to be a Ray Eagle and now is a Warren Warrior. Outside of school, Kaylee is a member of the Forney FFA team, where she raises and shows rabbits and goats. And I've seen her, and she is awesome at it. She plans to continue to be part of FFA through her high school years, and then after high school, Kaylee, and I didn't persuade her, would like to go to Texas A&M University, become a veterinarian technician. She would also like to one day own a horse rescue ranch. In school, her favorite subject is math, and her favorite teacher is Miss Bratton, and who she got to have for 2 years in a row, so she was super excited about that. When she was nominated for this honor, her teachers had this to say about her. Kaylee works hard every day and always does her best. She is an example for other students with her behavior, her respect, and her positive character. She is a great all-around student. Join me in celebrating such an awesome student, Kaylee Sanders.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to present to you our October Student of the Month for Lewis Elementary. It's our 4th grade Kinsley Otwell. She is accompanied tonight by her parents, Jennifer and Ryan Ozzie Otwell, and her sister Cadence Otwell, and her grandmother has come, Miss Edie Roberts. And there might be a brother show up, hopefully. If not, maybe he'll see this on video, right? Caden Gamble. She has a precious puppy, Bo, but he was not able to attend tonight's event, but I'm sure he's going to be super excited to congratulate her when she gets home. Kinsley puts forth her best effort in all classroom assignments and continually strives to become a better student every day. She works very hard in class to show growth in each area of her academics, and her teachers indicated to me that she has a wonderful attitude toward learning and is always giving 110%. Kinsley sets a great example for her peers by being patient, kind, and helpful. The compassion she shows to others is evident and acknowledged by her teachers. She makes great choices and follows all parts of the social contract created by her and her classmates. In her free time, she enjoys playing volleyball, playing outside, and practicing cheer. Her favorite subjects are science, reading, and writing. And Kinsley expressed to me that she would like to be a teacher in the future with a focus on science. So we might just be looking at a future Forney ISD educator here. So Kinsley Otwell was chosen to represent Lewis Elementary as our Student of the Month because she exemplifies the spirit of a model leopard, and we couldn't be more proud of her. If you'll join me in congratulating Kinsley.
So I'll rise for the pledges. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kim Zastigal, Executive Director of Marketing Communications.
Good evening. So I am excited to present to you a donation from Hand Hero. They have graciously donated 512 cases, which is over 6,000 bottles of hand sanitizer to our district. They wanted to show their appreciation for the real heroes who protect and keep our families safe by donating to local school districts and first responders. So we're so grateful for their contribution, and we'd like to ask the board to please accept this donation on behalf of Forney ISD.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to receive this donation?
Mr. President, I move to receive the donation of Hand Hero.
Mr. Johnson's made the motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Carroll? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to staff recognitions, and I'll introduce Dr. Judy Webb, Chief of Learner Services.
So it's a pleasure to recognize our campus administrators. I can't say enough about what they do every day for the kids of this district, for the families of this district, and for the district at large. So when I call your name, administrators, come up. I'm going to gift for you that we're pretty excited about, and then we'll keep our mask on. We can get a nice group photo, so make sure you have beautiful eyes. Just a little way to say thank you for all that you do. So, we'll start off with Courtney Parker, Blackburn Elementary. Angela Abrams Malone from Clavin Elementary. Rachel Bonner from Criswell Elementary. Lloyd Ashcraft from Crosby Elementary. Laurie Branch from Henderson Elementary. Nancy McRoy from Johnson Elementary. Jenny Karstrom from Lewis Elementary. And Chrissy Crabtree, Virtual Elementary and Griffin Elementary School. Moving on to intermediate, Dr. Barbie Donahue from Ray Intermediate. And Courtney Rodriguez from Smith Intermediate. Brenda Lopez from Virtual and Rhodes Intermediate. Moving on to middle, Judith Willis from Brown Middle School. And Molly Pearl, Virtual and Jackson Middle School. Josh Garcia then from Warren Middle School. Dr. Jonathan Campbell, Forney High School. Michael Jung, North Forney High School. And Dr. Pam Luttrell, Forney Learning Academy. We have a tremendous group of leaders, and I'm just proud to get to work with these individuals. They really make a huge difference in Forney ISD. So we can group together for a photo. Yeah. It's gone, you guys.
here to share. This will be for our community award recognition. So,
And I believe, Mr. Ferris, that this one we're saving for next time since Barbara Jo couldn't be with us this evening. So we'll present that in November. But for our community recognition, we would like to recognize some of our Forney family partners this evening. And so I'm going to play a little video here, and I'll talk over it a little bit because it's got some music on it. But we have a lot of people in the room tonight that, as our world changed last spring, they really came together to help us serve our Forney family. And so as we started a new school year, we had a lot of families in need. And these community partners rallied to collect, organize, raise funds for uniforms and backpacks. They washed countless loads of laundry, mended gently used uniforms, and sorted into all sizes. So they donated, collected, and ran their own fundraisers to provide money for supplies and backpacks for over 800 of our students and their families. So we are so grateful for their time, hard work, and generosity, and want to recognize our Forney Family Back to School Resource Fair partners this evening. This was our second annual resource fair, and they made it more successful than ever. So we have representatives with us tonight. So as I call your organization, if you'll come forward from the First Presbyterian Church. From Forney Community Ministries. From Sea Life. Rely On. Trinity Valley Electric Co-op. Texas Infinity Air. Sticky Ribs. Sharing the Love. And our First United Methodist Church. I don't believe we have anyone here with us tonight from Kumon Learning Center or Fellowship Church, right, Dana? They were unable to attend this evening, but we'll make sure they get their certificates. Oh, did you have another one? First Baptist Church or Fellowship Church? Oh, we'll get that to them. Or Fellowship?
come on.
Rick, if we could get in a little closer, so we can put our mask on.
At 7:26, we'll call this meeting back to order with item number 7, which is our public hearing for the School Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. Mr. John Chase, Chief Financial Officer, will come at this time. May I have a motion to enter into this public hearing?
So moved.
Mr. Andrews, and a second?
So moved.
Mr. Carroll. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chase, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Just by way of introduction, I guess for the last 20 years, the Texas Education Agency has published a financial accountability rating for each school and open enrollment charter school in the state. The purpose of the rating was to measure the quality of financial management practices and to improve performance in the management of financial resources.
Mr. Chase, could you move a little closer to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Is that better? So as far as the rating model goes, the evaluation includes 15 performance measures or indicators, the CEA likes to call them. These measures are divided into 3 categories. The first is critical, the second is solvency, and then finally the financial competency indicators. The financial data used to assign the rating was derived from the 2019 financial report that we're here to discuss tonight. And a maximum score of 100 points can be awarded, and a rating of A, B, C, or F can be assigned. Now, the first category of the financial performance measure is the critical indicators. This name, as it suggests, indicators. If you don't pass any one of these measures, it's an automatic F rating for your district. So just moving into the indicators themselves, there are 5 in this category. Actually, 4 only got scored this year, and last year I think it was the same thing. The reason number 5 was not scored is the state share, or the share of the liabilities in the teacher's retirement pension, and the TRS retiree health insurance program was started. We had to start recognizing those liabilities in our accounting records the last couple of years, and so as you can imagine, these liabilities cause several districts to have negative net positions, in unrestricted net position, for liabilities that will probably never ever be repaid or paid by a school district. So I think the TEA may be reevaluating how they measure that in future years, but for this year they're not scoring that. But the ones they did score, the financial report was filed by the deadline, and our deadline was the end of November last year. We did get it filed by the deadline. Did we get an unmodified audit opinion or a clean audit report, as it's sometimes referred to, and did we have satisfactory internal controls? And as you are aware, last year when they reported the audit, we did have an unmodified report and satisfactory internal controls. The next is compliance with debt repayment agreements. This basically is, did we default on any of our debt service payments? And as you know, we did not default on any debt repayments. We paid them all on time. And then finally, measuring the payments to make timely payments to other governments like the IRS, TRS, and the Texas Workforce Commission. And I'm happy to say that we made timely payments in all categories. So we passed every indicator in this category. The next second category is the financial performance measures, our financial solvency indicators. This group of measures is designed to ascertain whether the district has assets in excess of liabilities and whether the district can pay its debts. So the first indicator was days of cash on hand, and to get maximum points, district must have 90 or more days of cash on hand, and we actually had 107 days of cash on hand. The second measure is current assets to current liabilities, and to get maximum points in this indicator, the district must have $3 of assets for every $1 of liability. These are current assets and current liabilities. And I'm happy to report that we had $3.1 of assets to $1 of current liabilities. So we got max points for that indicator as well. The next, long-term liabilities to total assets. To get the maximum number of points in this measure, long-term liabilities, you must have $1 of asset for every 60 cents of long-term liabilities, basically. In the measure, it's like asking whether someone, if their mortgage exceeded the market value of their home, is another way to look at it. Unfortunately, this indicator also recognizes that high-growth districts like ourselves, we have a lot of added additional operating costs when we're opening new buildings and new campuses, and so they give us grace on that indicator. So as long as we have grown over 7% in student enrollment over the last 5 years, then they give you max points on this, and we grew, I believe it was 23% in that time period. So certainly we are a fast growth district. So this measure, they gave us the max points on that because of that. Finally, the next one is revenue to expenditures, and to get the max points here, you basically have to have revenues that are equal or exceed your expenditures. And as you know, over the last 5 years, we've had surplus budgets pretty much every year for the last 5, with the exception of last year. And that one, there was an anomaly there because of the large overpayment, or underpayment that we got. It's like $6.6 million, and so we actually received that this current year. But other than that, over the last 5, we've been having revenues in excess of expenditures as we build our financial strength in the district And so we got max points in that category. Next is the debt service coverage ratio. The ratio is designed to measure the district's ability to pay its debt service that will become due during the current year. To get max points here, the district is required to have $1.20 of resources for every dollar of debt service for the current year. And in our case, we had $2.40 of current resources to offset the dollar of debt service. So very good shape there. Next, the administrative cost ratio. The ratios measure the percentage of the district's budget spent on administration. In order to get max points here, our district, our size must have 8.5% or less on administrative costs, and that's a little bit misleading to some degree. And you think if you just look in the administration part of the budget, function 41 in the audit report, that would be what that would include, but it also includes expenses in function 21 and 53. And so when you boil all that down and the way they calculate this ratio, we spent 7.6%, and it's well under the 8.5%, so we got max points for that as well. And then finally, in this category, we've got student to staff ratio, or the decline thereof. And so in school districts where the enrollment is actually declining, what the state wants to make sure is that the people that are on your payroll are actually declining in proportion to the students that are leaving, declining in your district, because that's a recipe for disaster if you don't. You basically, if you don't cut your expenses as your student enrollment declines, as you know, that's how you earn revenue to support your district. And so if you have declines, they want to see declines in the staffing ratios as well, or at least a proportional decline. And so in our case, we're a rapid growing district. We're not going to have any declines in enrollment, so we got the max points in that category as well. So as far as the solvency indicator goes, we got max points in every one of those areas. And then finally, we're going to move to the financial competency indicators. And these are basically designed to measure all business, our business practices in the district, to make sure that we're doing, functioning in a sound manner. First off is, did we report our PEMS data that match what was in our annual financial report? And I'm happy to report that it's nearly identical, usually as every year. And so we have to submit a data feed to the state at the end of June, I guess, and they use that data and compare it to this financial report that, in this case, was delivered last October. And then they'll check and see if there's any discrepancies there, and if there are, and if it's large enough, then you would not get your points in this category. But again, we don't have any problems there. And next would be material noncompliance for laws related to federal grants. Basically, is what this is measuring. And so, the auditor, independent auditor, comes in and looks at our federal grants every year, and they'll do some testing on that to make sure that we're following the grant guidelines. And if there's some things that was some material noncompliance worth reporting, they would report that to you in the audit report. And I'm happy to report that there were no material noncompliance issues for that. And then lastly, we know in the past we've had to deal with this, but the last 5 or 6 years, it's not been an issue for us. But if you had a state aid repayment plan longer than a year, basically what that means is that if we were overpaid and we spent our overpayment, and we had to ask the EA to give us longer than 1 year to pay them back for overspending that state aid that they sent to us, then they would not give you the points in that category. But as you know, the last 4 or 5 years, or at least 4, I think, we've had underpayments where they've actually owed us money. And the same for this year that we just ended. But it's not as large as it has been in the past, but they still owe us a little bit of money. So that said, we passed all those indicators, and then just wrap up. The district did receive the maximum of points per score of 100 this year. That is a superior rating, as you know from past years. And that concludes the presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions from the board? John, just one clarification. You mentioned there at the end, there's still some aid owed back to us. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir. So we have another agenda item on the agenda board agenda tonight, and so That is correct. They still owe, or they don't owe us now. They paid us in September, but it was about almost $500,000 from last year that they do owe us from what we earned versus what we received.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Any other questions from the board? This is a public hearing. Any questions from the audience? I hear none. Okay, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Mr. Johnson, do I have a second to close the public hearing?
Second.
Mr. Regan, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Chase, it's 7:38 and this public hearing is closed. We'll move on into item number 8, reports. Next 3 items are reports only and require no action from the board. We'll start off with 8A, the monthly financial report. Mr. Chase, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Again, this is a monthly financial report. It's reporting the activity through August 31st, 2020. Just for a summarize, the revenues collected for the month of August is $608,000. Again, we actually had more cash flow than this for the month, but as you know, based on the background information in the board book, we have the July and August payments that we actually get for state aid that is to pay us for the prior fiscal year. We are allowed to record those revenues in the prior fiscal year because that's when they were earned, and it's within 60 days after the fiscal year end. So, you know, we actually had a lot more than cash that month, but that's all we got as far as revenue recognition. Moving on to the expenditures, we had $11.4 million in expenditures for the month. Year-to-date revenue recognized is $1.3 million, or 1% of the amount estimated. Year-to-date expenditures was $16.6 million, or 14% of the amount appropriated. Moving on to the debt service side, we had almost $67,000 in tax collections for the month. We paid, had our first semi-annual debt service payment for the year. As you know, August and February is when our 2 payments that are due to our bondholders. In August, it's usually the larger of the 2. That's $18.5 million was paid out. Year-to-date revenue recognized is $192,000, and in year-to-date expenditures, that's 1% of the amount estimated, and the expenditures is the same as the amount as we had in August because we had no expenditures in July, which was 73% of the amount appropriated. And we had plenty of fund balance on hand to make that debt service payment. We had no issues paying our bondholders this past month, so in really good shape there. So finally, the cash on hand at the end of the month of August, we had the general fund, food service, debt service, capital projects total was $89.6 million. And about half of that was actually capital project funds, as you know, for the elementary, intermediate, and middle school that we're currently under construction right now. And we'll be, you know, that'll be burning through that cash flow in pretty short order. But that's the financial report. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board? And moving on into 8B, summary of finance update.
Thank you again, Mr. Ferris. As I alluded to earlier, this is the normal time of the year that we talk about our summaries of finances update. This is the time of the year that we get our near final summaries of finance. It's usually issued in September. We actually had, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 different iterations of it this September, which is a little unusual. And part of it had to do with the fact that we had, you know, House Bill 3 with the new formula system, and the state trying to get all the data sets into the formula and get the right number issued to the district, so we know what our final numbers were you know, what revenue we were entitled to. So about the middle of September, I think they finally got the latest one out there that was correct. There are 2 columns in the summaries of finances. By way of introduction here, there's the LPE side, and all year long, in most when we talk about it, you know, in March, I think we'll talk about it again. There's a district planning estimate side, but now that we've got all the data that we need to actually calculate what our state aid payment's supposed to be, they changed that to near final. And so then you can compare the 2 and see if the district is over or underpaid, as we discussed earlier. So I pulled out some excerpts of the summaries of finance, and by the way, this is posted online, as you know. You can go out to the TEA's website and go to their A to Z index and look up summaries of finance and put it into our county district number and the year you want to look at, and you can look at any summaries of finances and all the different reruns that they've done. If there's any data set adjustments throughout the year, anytime you want to, it's open for the public and for any school district for that matter. So anyway, just by way of introduction here on the legislative planning estimate that they used to pay us or flow us the cash all year long was based on an average daily attendance of 11,481. This year, and I'll say it in this fashion, it's the adjusted refined ADA of 11,327. So normally that's what our actual refined average daily attendance is, but this year is kind of a different year, obviously, with the coronavirus. And so what the state has actually done, which is something they've never really done before, since I've been doing this for the last 20, but the federal government appropriated some funds to school districts to help offset coronavirus expenditures, and it was in our case it was about $330,000, I think, and change. But what the state did on that is they cut the state support from schools. 90% of that they used to offset the state funding formula. So in order to do that, the way they adjusted the formula is they come in, they proportionally reduced our refined ADA to equal a number that was 90% of what our ESSER grant funds total was supposed to be. So our actually refined ADA was like 11,370 or 380, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so, but they knocked off about 50 students in order to recoup that $400,000 or so. So moving on to the next part of the summary of finances I pulled out was the property values. And as you know, our values grew about 18% this last year, which is represented there at that 4.7 billion or 4.8 billion almost. And you compare that to what it was the previous year on that box above that of just over 4 billion. This is kind of a new way that the state has done their summaries of finances. As you know, in previous years, that number in line 7 was actually the property value from the previous fiscal year, because there was that lag in the way they put this in the funding formula. But they moved the current year values during this last legislative session with that House Bill 3, and so they adjusted the formula in February with our actual property value number, and they also went in and adjusted the legislative payment estimate side. And so the cash flow that they had originally estimated with I believe that they were using a statewide average of about 5.7% increase in property values. Once they got our almost 18% property value increase, they plugged that into that LPE side, and they adjusted the remaining cash flow payments that they had to send us accordingly, which is again is new. But just kind of digress for just a second. We just went through the first rating the district was assigned this year, and moving forward, I think next year is maybe the first year that they're going to start with the new rating system, which is going to be a little bit different number of indicators and a different way that they're going to assign the points values and so forth. One thing that they're adding to the first rating is did we, as an administration, discuss the property value and the property value lag and how it affects state funding with the school board within 120 days of the budget adoption. And so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Now, it is a little bit different, again, because they have actually moved to current values in the funding formula after they made this change, what they projected change in the first rating. But I haven't heard anything to say that they're not going to put this rating in the rating system next year. So I'll talk to you tonight how I think it's still probably relevant to us, but it may be something that might not get scored next year. I'm not sure how exactly they're going to handle this, but anyway, essentially what happens is in that high, fast growth district like ours, using the prior year value makes you look poorer than you actually are for the current year, and so they're paying you based on the prior year's values for current year enrollment. And so what that does is you actually earn a little bit more money in the funding formula. But over time, what happens is when your property value slows down, that additional money through that funding lag you stop getting that. And so I think that's the main thing the state was trying to, impress upon school boards and administration in school districts, that, you really need to keep an eye on that. You don't need to base, current operating expenses on that. It's going to be reoccurring, because if you do, the year that you stop getting that, it's going to make you're going to have a problem in your budget to make things, to keep things, on the plus side. So again, where I think it's relevant here is, in our district, there is a caveat in the way that they're funding the districts right now. There's this transition assistance, form of transition assistance they're giving to districts. And what they basically do is they run the funding formula as if the old funding formula was in place, and they run it under the new scenario. And if you got more money under the old scenario, they give you the difference as transition assistance. And so we actually did qualify for transition assistance this year because we grew 18% in our property values. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what that actually means for us, is that the state values with the 5.7% increase, if you go back and look at that summaries of finances, for the state and local portion of what we'd have for the general fund to operate our school district would be $92.9 million. Now, when you go back in and adjust it for what our actual property values were, we were actually entitled to $95.1 million, and most of that $2.2 million difference is related to the form of transition assistance. And so, they have put that transition assistance. We're supposed to be getting that for the next 5 years, and so this is the second year in the budget we're in right now that we're going to keep getting it. We'll have it for 3 years after that, and then assuming that our property values keep growing like they are. I mean, if they slow, then when they recalculate that transition assistance, it may be less than $2 million over time. But right now with our district as fast as we're going, in the next 3 years, I don't see that that's probably going to be an issue for us. It could change a little bit with coronavirus. I don't know that anybody really has a good answer to that yet, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference right now when you look around the district and see how much building is going on. So getting back into the summaries of finances, just in that next excerpt that I pulled out of the board report, we were entitled to receive $46.3 million in foundation school program revenues. The available school fund, we got another $3.4 million, and then we got almost a little over $400,000 in additional aid for homestead exemptions, and that to help with our debt service payments. Now, basically what that is, we've talked about this in the past, I don't know, probably 7 years ago now, ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. The state came in and said, your homestead exemption used to be $15,000 and it's now $25,000. And so that additional $10,000 that they required us to give the homeowners, that had a detrimental effect on the amount of debt service collections that we could collect in order to pay our debts that we based those collections on and past debt modeling. And so what they did was they came back in and said, okay, well, we're just going to make you whole for that. You're not going to lose any money because we required you to give them the additional $10,000 in homestead exemptions. And so that's what that $400,000 represents. Now, in past years, we've gotten EDA and IFA funds, as you know, instructional debt allotment and existing debt allotment funding. That's based on the state guarantees that you'll collect $35 per penny per pupil on your tax rate for debt service. And if you didn't collect that much, then they would make you whole up into that $35 threshold. Well, we've grown so much over the last few years with our property values as compared to our student numbers that we're actually more wealthy now, and we're collecting more than $35 per penny per pupil, so we're not getting any assistance from the TEA for that anymore. So just to wrap it up here, we as I discussed earlier, we had earned $46.3 million based on all the enrollment that ADA that we turned in for the year in property values. We actually were paid $45.7 million, 45.8 if you round it off, which is a difference of $487,000, which again, that's what they underpaid us. And they gave us that underpayment in September before they gave us our first September payment. So we do have the money in the bank now, but slight underpayment again, that's almost a break even. That's pretty close when you consider it's $45 million. It's very, 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 very close. And as you remember, last year at this time we were talking about a $6.6 million underpayment. So We're pretty well right on target now with what we should be getting in cash flow during the year versus what we're earning, at least we were this year. So basically to wrap up, as I said, we got underpaid about almost $500,000, and this amount, we didn't collect it within 60 days of our fiscal year end, so that amount is not recognized as revenue in our audit report that will be delivered tonight. That's actually getting deferred until this current school year that we're in, so we'll pick up another $500,000 in revenues in the current year that we did not technically budget for, if you want to call it that. Again, we got it at the end of September. So that's the summary of the financial report. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board? I hear none. Thank you, Mr. Chase. Move on into report C, limited English proficient student enrollment report. Dr. Weber.
Good evening again. Each year, Board Policy EHBE states that a district shall report to the board the number of limited English proficient LEP students on each campus and shall classify the students according to their language. So here's my annual report. Here's each campus as they're represented by the total number. And so our total number of LEP students this year is 1,198. So we're continuing to grow in this area as a district. So I actually grabbed a little bit for you and notice the sharp rise in Criswell. That's because we concentrated our dual language program, which reduced it off of Blackburn and Clavin. But there's a couple other campuses. You'll see a sharp increase for 2020. The blue line, and that would be Lewis, and you can see it again at Brown and North. So when I look at the percentage of students that are LEP as a district, we kind of started trending down, then went up a little bit, started to tell, and here in 2020, we took a little bit sharper increase in the number of LEP students. But what's interesting is we had 31 languages last year, and this number really fluctuates between 29, 30, 31, 30, goes up and down. But this year we went up to 38 languages, and I included some of our new ones for this year, and I'll have to sit and look at some of those to actually identify, where and what they are. But the number of languages that's increasing, that really makes it more difficult to meet the kids' needs, because it's not just a Spanish-speaking population issue where we have a nice bilingual program, a lot of Spanish-speaking people. So our languages are increasingly becoming more diverse and increasing, but it does fluctuate each year. So are there any questions about our LEP population?
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Any questions?
Thank you.
I hear none. Moving on to item D, annual attendance data report. Ms. Kim Horsack, Chief of Information, Innovative and Technology Services.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris, Board. This is just a brief reminder that we are building some new schools. We actually introduced 3 new principals to you tonight. The principal for Griffin, the principal for Rose, and the principal for Jackson. So those schools do open next year. So we're going to have to adjust our attendance zone. So in the board workshop, we went through the kind of the timeline that we needed to follow in order to get the information to our parents as quickly as possible. Just as you recall, these are kind of the steps that we laid out the last time. We had a fairly large remodification of our attendance boundaries when we opened Ray and Smith. Establish a process, create our communication plan, review the impact on programs. We'll review it, have you guys review it, have the public present to us in public forums. Review that input, and then report back to you guys for adoption. So we have put a timeline together that we looked at the board workshop last month. And so we're going to publish this timeline as our actual modification timeline instead of the proposed timeline. As you'll notice, we've already accomplished the first one on August 31st at the board workshop. We presented this timeline to you. We did not receive any feedback to adjust anything. So tonight, we're going to discuss any other parameters you'd like to adjust as far as this goes. And then on October 26th, we will present our preliminary rezoning options to you. We will have 2 public town halls, which will be on November 5th and November 10th, one on each side of town that will let the public know about. And then on November 17th, we will have a public hearing for the rezoning. We'll finalize everything on a rezone plan on December 7th. We do have a meeting this Wednesday with our demographer to kind of get an update on our numbers. He has this year's numbers and looking where we are to kind of start really working through the plan so we have something ready to propose to the board. So any questions or comments or anything that we need to adjust?
Yes, go ahead. Is the public meetings or for the public input, are those going to be face-to-face or virtual?
Don't know that we've determined that yet. We talked about doing them face-to-face and we talked about doing them virtually. So I think that depending on where we are with COVID, and Dr. Terry may want to add to that, I don't know that that's been determined.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I think, Mr. Andrews, that we're obviously, as we grow closer, we're probably going to have to figure out a way to allow all of our patrons to have a voice in the process, whether it's face-to-face or virtual. I think some of the challenges we face is limitation on Zoom meetings participants, so we'll have to kind of look at maybe some unique ways that we can get that information to them and they can provide feedback, maybe even in an alternate setting than just that meeting.
Okay, and we'll do the proper amount of advertising or whatnot, so everybody knows what's going on, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I was going to, is it me or is it her? Yes, sir. We will, Kristen, Ms. Zastable, we're actually working on preparing some things for our public on the website as well as email blast. And any way that we can get that information out, we definitely want participation and value everyone's voice in the process for sure. Yes, sir.
And just as an aside, we have begun speaking to our principals kind of about this process and the timeline, and talking about what that's going to look like with attrition and the number of people we'll be hiring, just kind of make sure they understand what that process is going to be.
One thing you might add up as well is we'll go and do staff meetings over the next probably 1st of November timeframe, so that as this is obviously an impact to them as well, possibly, so to try and describe the process for our staff transitions as well when we do open the third, middle, and intermediate.
We don't foresee as much of an impact as we did with the middle and intermediate, which is a positive thing, staff-wise.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
We're moving on then to item 9, public forum. At this time, the board will hear comments from the audience only during the public forum time as recommended by TASB policies. At this time, we do have one person who signed up, Mrs. Grace Johnson. We're fortunate to have her with us tonight. She's one of our retired teachers, and she helped make Forney Family what it is today. Ms. Johnson, if you'll bear with me as I have some introductions to read before you begin. The board will allot now 30 minutes of time. In your case, for each speaker will allow 3 to 5 minutes to address the board. Please respect the privacy of others and refrain from identifying students, employees, and other community members by name. The board requests that comments of any subject, whether positive or negative, be courteous and respectful. Disruption of the meeting will not be tolerated at any time. Any speaker with a specific complaint about a district employee, decision, or operation of your student should present that complaint through the appropriate mechanisms, which is the district's formal grievance process. Speakers who provide detail about specific complaints will be stopped and will be referred to district administrators for information and the proper procedures. So Ms. Johnson, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris and board. I am here seeking change going forward, but we don't tend to change things if we don't recognize errors. So I'm not here to be rude, but I am here to be frank. So I do appreciate you giving me a few minutes to discuss the district's motto of Forney Family and the newest initiative, the Hope Handoff, and how those things can be impacted in a negative way when they appear disingenuous. Case in point number 1, a teacher in this district for 30 years before retiring and 15 of those 30 also included driving a bus. While it is true the employee received a very nice plaque, noting those 30 years of service, the delivery of it was lacking. The plaque was given to an employee, a colleague of the employee, and asked to drop it off at the house. Nothing else, just a drop off. Something only a tad bit more personal than an Amazon delivery, in that at least it was not delivered by a stranger. But to add salt to the wound, the plaque was delivered 1 year after retirement. And in that 1 year, no one even thought to write a thank you note for those 30 years or to explain a delay in acknowledging the retirement. Case in point number 2. 33 years as a teacher, retired several years past, received all the usual accolades normally given back in a time pre-COVID when we could actually make a big deal out of it and have a district-wide ceremony and, you know, have pictures made and all kinds of great things. And I'm happy that employee number 2 got all the well-earned accolades appropriate for 33 years of serving this district as an educator. However, this employee was also a bus driver, one who continued to drive a bus even after retirement from the classroom until medical reasons forced retirement this fall. Now, it's probably been decades since any of you have been on a school bus and remember how loud and rowdy and fun and playful it can be. Driving a bus is probably the next hardest job in this district outside of a classroom. And this employee drove a bus for 48 years. We have drivers that don't last 48 hours, and he drove 48 years. He is probably the longest serving employee this district has ever had. And guess how that service was recognized? Not even so much as a letter, let alone a nice plaque delivered by another driver. This employee got nothing, zilch. For 48 years as the face of the district, there was the first person every morning to greet students coming to school and the last one to say goodbye in the afternoon. So the question behind these two situations would be, is this how we treat family? Because if it is, I shudder to think how we treat others who were just mere friends and acquaintances to Forney ISD. And we can't say, well, there was COVID, you know, because there are dozens of other ways their service could have been recognized if somebody had just put their heads together and said, you know, there is a lot of value in decades of service to this district, and we need to do something about it. And so I ask you, if you worked for decades for this district, is that how you would want your career to end? Without so much as a thank you letter? I dare say the answer is no. Our Forney family motto is occasionally lacking in implementation, but it was shamefully remiss in these two instances. We should all be ashamed that their careers ended after so many years with so little regard from all of us. And since the Forney family made no public acknowledgement to them, I say it here publicly. Thank you for decades of service, Deborah Williams and Randy Lawhorn. And in the spirit of the hope handoff, it is my hope no future, long-term, career employees are treated with such a cavalier dismissal after serving this district and this community with such heart. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Item number 10, consent agenda. 10A is approved minutes of the August 31st, 2020 master planning workshop. 10B, approved minutes of August 31st regular board meeting. 10C, approved budget amendments. 10D, approved the hazardous bus routes. 10E, approval of prevailing wage. F, approved the foreign exchange waiver. G, approved the update 115 as a final reading, as you see them all listed there. 10H, approved the 7th grade dyslexia diagnostic waiver. And 10I, approved the payment of Mesquite Regional Day School for the deaf. The board may take action on each of these separately or collectively. Do I have a motion from the board?
Mr. Ferris, I move that we approve the consent agenda collectively as presented.
Mr. Johnson's made a motion. We approve it collectively. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Andrews? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Thank you very much. Moving on into number 11. Consideration of possible approval of the annual financial audit. Mr. John Chase, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Tonight we have Dan Ton here. He's a partner with Hankins, Eastet, Deaton, Ton & Say. As you know, that's the independent audit firm that we use, have used now for the last, I think, 5 audits in the district for to perform their work and to basically issue an opinion on our financial statements as a whole in the district. So if you will, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tom tonight. He's got a presentation here, and I think you have a copy of the audit report in front of you. He's just going to go ahead and touch on a few high points of that and answer any questions that you might have. So Dan, you want to come up?
Good evening, board. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you just a few minutes about the audit. The audit went very well. We started the audit back the latter part of May. Did some preliminary work, looked at quite a few systems and did a lot of test work at that point. And then we came back in September after the finance staff had closed the books for the June 30 year end, did our year end testing, and prepared the report that's in front of you tonight. As I said, the audit went very well. The staff was very well prepared. The district is in very good financial condition. We'll see that as we go through the numbers. So overall, I think it's just a very positive audit. Our engagement team consisted of 4 members of our firm. Jessica Lindley was the senior staff. She's a CPA, has been on our staff for 12 years. Reed Hadley is a newer staff member that's a degreed accountant. Myself was the engagement partner. I was here throughout the field work. And then a second partner reviews all of the work to make sure that it's up to our professional standards and resolves any questions that came out through the audit process. The audit process involves several different steps. The circle in the middle represents the ultimate result of the audit, which is an opinion on the financial statements and on your major federal programs. To do that, we go through a complete process of risk assessment, substantive analytical review, which just means looking at the numbers, do they make sense, comparing this to that, comparing it to the prior year, comparing it to peer districts, a lot of analytical review, test of controls, which is your internal controls, were things appropriately approved, Was there appropriate support for all of the transactions? And then verification, confirmation, and substantive testing. And that's communication with your banks, your bondholders, all of the different pieces. As John mentioned, all of your state payments are on the TEA website. We communicate with the county tax office to verify your property tax collections. So there's quite a bit of verification, confirmation, and testing. The opinion that you receive on your financial statements, there's really three types of opinions, and I'm not going to go into that in great detail because you received an unmodified report, which is the highest level of assurance that you can receive as a governmental entity. Some of the lower levels of reports are modified or disclaimer, but those were really not in effect. So there are two sets of financial statements that you see in your audit report. The first are called government-wide financial statements. These are presented on a full accrual basis. They include all current and long-term assets and liabilities and deferred inflows and outflows of resources. The fund financial statements, which is the ones that show your general fund, your debt service fund, capital projects fund, things of that nature, they're more current in nature. They don't include long-term debt. They don't include capital assets. They're really designed to present a more short-term view of the resources and liabilities of the district. Just some of the key points in your government-wide financial statements. Your total assets were $401 million. That included $127 million in cash and $257 million in capital assets. You had deferred outflows, deferred charges on bond refundings of $10.9 million, deferred outflows related to pensions and OPEB of 15.5 and 7.5 respectively. Your total liabilities were $516 million. Your bond-related and other debt was $434 million. Your net pension liability was $26 million, and your OPEB liability was $30.8 million. And you're probably saying, well, what the heck is OPEB? That stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That's the TRS managed retiree health care system. As an employee in Texas, as an employee of a Texas district, you're provided employee retiree health care once you retire through TRS, and this represents the cost of that program. Your net position was a negative $100 million. But your net position increased by $8.8 million. The reason your net position is negative, as John mentioned earlier, the liability for pensions and OPEB is a fairly new accounting requirement for governmental entities. That decreased your net position significantly. The other reason is, well, there's a lot of reasons. You're depreciating your assets quicker than you're repaying your debt. A lot of that has to do with the district has a lot of what are called capital appreciation bonds. I think you're familiar with that. So all of those things combined result in the negative net position. And as John mentioned when he was going through the first rating, that's not really scored as an indicator at this point because of the things that we talked about. We talked just a little bit about pensions. That reduced your net position by $16.4 million. And then OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, decreased your net position by $36.6 million. The fund financials, as I said, these present a much more short-term view of the district. And on the fund financials, you have significant fund balance. You have total assets of $144 million. The general fund has a due from state of $13 million. And general fund cash is $42.8 million. This is all as of June 30. You might say, well, John's report on the summary finance showed a receivable from the state of $500,000. What does the $13 million represent? You received payments for last year's revenue in July and August. They pay September through August. And so the $13 million is what you received in July and August for the prior school year. The $500,000 was what they still owed you at the end of August and was paid in September. But that's not recorded because it was received after 60 days of year end. Your total liabilities were $20.6 million, accrued wages of $8.1 million, and unearned revenue of $353,000, and none of that was to the state. This shows your general fund balance history for the last 7 or 8 years. You can see that you've made significant improvements in your fund balance. There was a very significant increase for fiscal year 20 for several reasons. It went up from $24.5 million to $46.7 million. Part of that increase was the $6.6 million that you received from the state that really related to the 18-19 school year. You also borrowed some maintenance tax notes to fund several construction projects. The proceeds of those notes increase your fund balance, and then as you spend that money, it decreases your fund balance. Well, you issued the notes late in the year, and not all of that money was spent by June 30, so that increased your fund balance. There was also a transfer from capital projects to the general fund that increased the general fund balance. That's part of the reason you had a slight decrease last year, is you paid some expenses that were eventually paid from the bond issue, and once the bonds were issued, the capital projects fund reimbursed the general fund. I believe it was $1.6 million. Budget to actual, I won't really go into that a lot. There were no expenditures that exceeded the budget. So you can see we already talked about the increase in fund balance of $22 million. Property tax collections increased by $3.9 million. Appraised values increased by $702 million. And your M&O collection rate was 98.6%, which is a very healthy collection rate. The general fund revenue by type, you can see that your property taxes are the green, 42%. State aid was 55%. That's a fairly significant increase in the state aid percentage. Because of HB3, you may remember that HB3 required the district to compress your tax rate. So your tax rate actually went down, I think it was 7 or 8 cents. But then the state made that up in the state funding formula. So that state funding percentage has been going down for years. And at least for 1 year, we saw that reversal. So this is your general fund expenditures by function. You can see obviously 54% was for instruction. And then your other student-related expenditures like transportation and plant maintenance and facilities. And then you did spend $5 million on facilities as part of that maintenance tax note issue. Your debt service fund, it increased by $4.1 million. Ending fund balance of $25.3. Your August debt service payment was $18.5 million, and John pointed that out on the finance report. You've got to have a fairly significant fund balance at June 30 because that August payment is due before you start collecting the tax revenue for the 2021 year. So the total principal and interest for the 2021 year is $21.4 million, and the debt service levy is $23.6 million. Internal controls and federal compliance, I mentioned this earlier. We evaluated those and tested those. We tested compliance with your federal programs. Each year, we're required to identify what are called major programs, and that's based on the size of your programs and a rotation basis. Every program of a certain size has to be audited as a major program at least every 3 years. This current school year, the major programs that we selected were the child nutrition program. This was a fun year to audit child nutrition with the COVID and the spring shutdown and all of that. Your staff did a great job, by the way, of getting those kids fed during that time. There were no financial statement or federal compliance findings during the audit. So that's very positive. So that's really what I wanted to visit with you about. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the board? I hear none. Dr. Terry, any comments?
Yes, sir, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you, Dan, Tom, for the work you've done and your work here over the past few years. We really do appreciate it. You're always a joy to work with your team. And I just want to say this is a great audit and just very proud of our school board and John and your team. Just want to give you extremely high compliments, not only in the first rating earlier, but also this wonderful audit. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your continued work in the school district.
Thank you very much.
Be sure to tell your whole firm we appreciate their professionalism and how they've helped us out in years. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to approve the audit as presented tonight?
Mr. Ferris, I make a motion to approve the 2020 annual financial report as presented.
Mr. Andrews has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Now Regan? I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Thank you very much. Moving on into item number 12, consideration of possible approval of retention pay. Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. As you know, I think for the last 4 years now, we have paid retention pay to employees of the district. And so for those employees that were employed on or before February 1st, I believe, and they continue employment through November with us of the following school year, then we have given them 1% of their midpoint of their pay grade, or in teachers' case, the middle part of the pay schedule, 1% of that. And so this past year, this past budget cycle, when we were in the summer, we actually included that line item in the budget, as you know, but we did tell you that we were not going to approve the release of that without coming back to the board and getting final approval before we do that, just because we were a little worried about what attendance might look like and with the coronavirus onset and how that might impact our revenues for the year. So I'm happy to report tonight that although our revenue or our average day attendance or enrollment, I guess specifically, is down a little bit from what our projection was, but we don't believe that it's down significantly enough to impact our ability to make that retention payment. And we do think, particularly in these times, those employees that are sticking it out, sticking with us, especially the teachers, gosh, those guys are working hard. They had all summer, trying to get prepped for this fall, and the learning settings that we're in right now. We just really feel like it's one of those things that we need to continue if we can do that. And so our revenue estimate may have to be adjusted down by close to $1 million because our enrollment's down, a little over 100 students, so what we're projecting it will be down based on what our budget was. But we do have several safety nets built into the budget. We had a $3.5 million placeholder for capital improvements. And you just heard tonight that we're also getting to recognize another $500,000 in revenue from the prior year and the current year now that we actually earned in, but we got it 60 days after the fiscal year in and some other things like that. So we feel like we're in a good spot right now. Our fund balance at the end of this past fiscal year then presented the assigned fund balance is right at $40 million, and so we're in a really good solid spot. I feel like that this is appropriate for us to be able to do that and continue the retention stopping this year. So our recommendation would be that the board approve that payment and that we process that on the November payroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Board, you've heard the recommendation. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Ferris, just one. Mr. Chase, I believe, I'm going on memory, we budgeted about $1 million for this.
It's around $600,000.
$600,000?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to end up, is that where the payment's going to be?
It's pretty close to it. It's within about 2 or 3 days. Honestly, yeah, it was really surprising. I think that the budget was 618 if my memory serves me right, and I think whenever I did the calculation, it came out to 616, so it was in about $2,000. I mean, it was like really close this year.
You're going to do better than that.
Well, in past years, it's actually we've had a little more money because I think we've had more folks that maybe have left. This year was kind of a weird year, but we were pretty well on top of the estimate, so we're in good shape there.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Ferris.
Any other questions from the board? I hear none. Dr. Terry, what is your suggestion?
Mr. Ferris, above any other year, I just got to compliment our staff, if that's okay for just a second. It's been obviously a challenging start, and above any other year, I'm just so proud to be able to recommend approval of our retention pay. I know this is always a priority for our board, and so appreciative of that. And I know this will be a nice little Christmas blessing for many. So we recommend approval of our retention stipend. And feel that we do have plenty of safety nets for any kind of shortfall that we will have to overcome short of our projected enrollment. Thank you.
Dr. Terry, may I have a motion?
Mr. Ferris, I make a motion to approve the retention pay as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Dobbs? Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 13, consideration of possible approval, the asynchronous learning plan. Ms. Sandy Whitley, Executive Director of Leadership Development and Special Programs, will present.
Dr. Terry, Mr. Ferris, Board. This may be one time when we truly saved the best for last, not because it's me, but because I know you have a copy of this plan, but I'm incredibly proud of the work that went into putting this all together. I had the honor of putting it together on paper, but it truly is a reflection of the work that happens every day with our teachers, our principals, our students, our parents, everyone in this building. So this project actually allowed us to kind of dive into that and really articulate what some of the great things that we're doing here. So I'll go through it pretty quickly. You do have copies, I believe, of the entire plan. So we'll start here. The purpose is to ensure that we continue getting our funding from TEA. Historically, we've got funding for students that are physically in our buildings. TEA recognized the fact that we have students learning from home, and so they didn't want to penalize us in terms of our funding. So this is how they are addressing that. The districts that elect to do this, the asynchronous learning plan, however, you are required to submit it to TEA. TEA approves it, and ultimately it gets posted on your website. Okay. So the definition of asynchronous learning, really as TEA presents it, is, and you can read this, but really the critical pieces are on their own time for students, interacting intermittently with their teachers, and it can happen via computer or other electronic devices. Asynchronous learning does not require all participants to be virtually present at the same time. And that's how it's different from synchronous. Okay? And that's really important, and that's one of those things that we're helping our parents understand too. So some of the examples are here. You can see we have online courses, again, intermittent teacher instruction, and pre-recorded videos, sometimes of instruction with guided support from teachers. There are actually 4 pieces to the plan. There is the instructional schedule, material design, student progress, and implementation. All of these are designed to compare your virtual learning to your on-site learning and to ensure that we are presenting comparable learning experiences for all of our students. So the first one is the instructional schedule. Basically, this outlines the expected time for students to interact with the academic content and for students to interact with their teachers. I added this Canvas logo at the bottom. I thought it was really powerful because it does represent that collaboration between students, teachers, and parents, which is what our virtual learning really is all about. So I'm not going to go through the entire plan, but I did want to highlight a few things. So this one is an instructional schedule highlight for our 3rd and 4th grade. And what this shows is the pink column is a traditional on-site learning day. Now this is only really our core content, so it doesn't include any electives or anything. But I did add SEL in there because I think that's critically important. The blue columns represent the remote learning that our students experience, and there's really 2 parts to that. That first column, that middle column there, is either the synchronous engagement where the teacher's actually logged on with the students, or the students engaging with videos and other instructional resources that are actually in Canvas. The final column there on the right, that's the additional asynchronous engagement. That's really the place where our students continue to learn, and that's a real good opportunity for parents then to work with their students. So you can see that we actually, in this case, have more minutes for our remote learning than we do for our on-site learning. And the requirement is that they're comparable. Okay? Materials design is basically our instructional resources. A couple things we have to ensure. One, that all of our resources are TEKS aligned, which is common always, but that we can modify our resources to be used in an asynchronous environment. And then also we have to specifically address how we serve our students with disabilities, including our English learners. That's not a disability, but how we serve both of those sets of students. So we can't just put things out there and say, you know, here, this is for everyone. We have to specifically address all of our students. So here are some highlights. Again, everything is TEKS aligned. We also have included our Future Ready curriculum, and I know that you're familiar with that. We've adapted that where appropriate so that it can be used in an asynchronous environment. But we also, again, bring in the parent involvement through the observer accounts in Canvas. So our parents really have access to pretty much everything that our students have access to. And that enables them to help support their students, and it actually facilitates good conversations between parents and teachers when they have questions. We also have to monitor student progress. And so here are a couple things on there and this is the definition by TEA. It has to be defined and trackable and include expectation for daily engagement. So we not only set out a lesson plan or a scope and sequence for 9 weeks or 1 week, we have to do it by day. All of that's in Canvas, and you all have an example of that in the full report. But we also have to track our student academic progress to ensure that they're learning at the same rate that we would expect them to learn in a face-to-face environment. So these are just some highlights. Of course, we do many other things, but these I wanted to highlight. One, the learning checks. We've been doing learning checks for years here in Forney ISD, and we really do those at the end of the unit, and we're monitoring by SE, we're monitoring by the TEKS to see how our students are doing. So we're doing that, we're still doing that. We're doing it face-to-face as well as in remote environments, so they are neck and neck tracking on that. The common formative assessments are really new this year, but this is really an exciting addition to me because this moves away from the traditional multiple choice format And it gives teachers other ways to monitor student progress. And so it can be anything from, reflection, it can be an exit ticket kind of thing, but it is intentionally not star-like, so that we can assess learning in other ways. Again, these happen in regardless of the environment, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's virtual. And then we also have the beginning of the year star, and I put this in here because this is really helping us modify our instruction and help us differentiate for our students. TEA provided this for us, and basically, because we didn't have STAR last year, we have this beginning of the year STAR, which gives us a starting point to ensure that we're serving our kids all of their needs. We have to make sure that we address the gaps as well as the content for the current year. And then implementation, obviously, is what it says, and basically that addresses two things. One, the professional development for educators. We have to make sure that our teachers are ready to teach in such an environment. We've had extensive PD throughout really late spring, when we first got into the COVID craziness, all through the summer. And so we've addressed not only the digital learning side of it and how do we work with that, we also have worked with them with content and the integration of content in the digital environment. And then we also have to ensure that there's explicit communication and support for the families. Once again, this is a big deal to us, you know that. There's a couple things that I wanted to highlight on family communication. One is the Parent Academy, which we took that name to actually encompass several different things that we're doing to connect with our families. We have face-to-face learning and support opportunities. The face-to-face learning, obviously we're still using limited enrollment and all appropriate safety measures are in place, masks, social distancing, that kind of thing. But those work well for people that just need to come in and sit down and have some conversations so we can help them through some things. We also have resources designed around parent feedback through surveys and Zoom meetings. We've had conversations with parents already, what's working, what's not, give us some feedback so we can make things better. We also have the website resources, and which includes anything from videos, click sheets, weekly highlights of new tools. We're trying to make that real time, we're trying to make it relevant, we're trying to make it current. One of the exciting things about the Parent Academy is the way it's built. It is flexible to any need, so it won't become obsolete once hopefully we get past the COVID craziness and get back to whatever normal looks like. This is something that we can maintain and use it to flex according to the needs and the desires of our parents. So that's pretty exciting. And then we also have student focus groups. We have to talk to the students. What's working for them, what's not working for them, how can we tweak what we're doing. So we want their perspectives, we want their experiences. We're splitting that into two groups. The middle and high school kids we think will have very different issues working in remote learning than the elementary, the 2nd through 6th grade. Middle and high school kids generally don't have trouble logging on. Some of the little ones sometimes do. So the plan is to bring kids in representation from every campus so that we can really get a good view from their perspective. And that's really it. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Whitley. Any questions from the board?
Mr. Ferris, I have one. Is TA going to, do you know if they're going to approve this plan based on the submittal of the merit of the plan, or are they going to wait to see the results from a school year, the grades of the kids on-site learners versus the virtual learners? Are they going to wait to see that data, or are they going to approve it based on what's submitted?
My understanding is that they will approve it based on the plan itself. Last I heard from the commissioner, there was 570 some submitted, and they had already approved 300 and some. The way it works is it has to be finalized before the end of the semester. So you submit it, they give you any recommendations or requirements for changes, you change it, resubmit it, and it gets finalized by the end of the semester.
And then a follow-up to that is once, this may go towards Dr. Weber, once we see that data to see how the two types of different learners are responding, we'll adjust.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not just about the plan to TEA, it is about serving our kids.
Okay, thank you.
questions? You are making Mr. Carroll lonely tonight. He's the only one with questions.
I have a question. On the boy test, I'm assuming we just finished some.
The beginning of the year.
Yeah.
In terms of data?
Yeah. I mean, does it show you like how far behind it are from previous year, or that's kind of what I assumed it was?
Yes,
the purpose of it?
yes, and yeah, it's not an accountability measure, it really is something for us, exactly.
I can answer that. We have very predictable data. We're predicting back from the spring that we would see a greater loss in math skills than in ELAR. Because each year in math, you learn new skills, and we missed 1/4 of the year. So 1/4 of the new skills, we were not able to teach. With reading, your fluency, your vocabulary, the depth of reading improves, but many of the skills stay the same from about 6th grade on. So from 6th grade on, our students took less of a dip. And sure enough, they predicted this last May, and our data came out exactly like that. So we know that we have some skill gap fill to do in mathematics, and so we've already outlined those, and we're working to put those in to support teachers before so some pre-teach items. With ELAR, we're seeing some pretty dismal results with 3rd grade. They came out of 2nd, not completing that year of reading skills. So we'll have a lot of intervention with 3rd and 4th as they're still really honing that ability to read. And so a lot of intervention there. For our older students in ELAR, I think we will just continue to work on the same rock solid ELAR skills that we have been doing, but we'll see some loss really in K-3. We don't have assessments for those, but in our younger kids, they did lose early reading instruction.
So it was pretty much, y'all, there were no big surprises to you guys. It was pretty much.
No, we saw SEs that were very low. Sure enough, we matched every one of those. We had not taught them yet. So we didn't see any disasters from information we had taught. We see some low reading scores for kids coming out 3rd. They miss quite a bit. And of course, math, when you miss 1/4 of your math instruction, we will have to fill those next spring as they come in and fit vertically. So we're writing that into our scopes and our plans for this year already because of the data.
Just to follow up, asynchronous, when do we think the board will have, you'll have data for us to show how the 2 learners are doing this year? I know there was a lag from last year, I understand that, but with this plan, on-site learners, virtual learners, when will we see the data on how the 2 programs are working and how the kids are responding? What's your next assessment that'll show that?
We are tracking our learning check data by separating them out in ELAR and math. And then we'll watch our interim assessment. The state has provided assessments, adaptive assessments throughout the year for us this year to help really hone in on what we can do. And the BOY, we couldn't separate it, but I think the interim, hopefully we can really get a good system to document who's at home at the end of November still, that smaller group of students, and who's face-to-face to look and see if there's any discrepancies. But we're about tracking learning checks, so current data, we're following it. Once we have a few assessments, we'll really get an idea.
And I guess, Dr. Cherry, that's going to be skewed with the number of students that are returning to the class in the near future?
Sure, a CFA, I think you heard Sandy mention earlier, is to me what is kind of setting Forney ISD apart from many other districts right now, because we are ensuring that the students in a face-to-face setting are actually doing the exact same work as those in a virtual setting. So, although Dr. Weber's referencing some of our more southern type approaches with our middle of the year assessments as well as our learning checks, we're actually getting a good guide too on a day-to-day basis. And I think that the CFAs themselves are literally keeping our virtual students at a level. We're asking them to perform at the same level as our on-site, and I don't think that regionally you would see some similar approaches to their virtual setting. So I'll just say I'm extremely proud of the work that extremely high-quality virtual learning setting. Now, to say that we are going to see exactly on par from virtual to face-to-face, I think I'll be the first one to say we can do a better job of face-to-face instruction than we can virtually. I think our staff would 100% agree with that because it's on-time intervention as well. So I hope I answered your question, but we'll definitely continue to keep an eye on that. One of the challenges that we're continually facing is in a virtual setting, how do you intervene with students? How do you create remedial skill gap fill type approaches? And it's something I think that we're seeing as a challenge across the state, but as well here in Forney. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, I just was gonna say, looking through the plan and reading through it, that you guys should just be commended. It's the amount of thought and work that went into putting that together to try and make it as equal as possible between learners at home and learners in school. Just thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the people I work with are the best I've ever worked with. I've been in this business a while, so I'm pretty proud of their work as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Willie, thank you again and all your team. Please share that because we do sincerely mean that. And we're fortunate to have you and all of them here to do this. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you for all the work and time, the hours.
Thank you.
Yeah, it started like last February, so.
We thought it was just going to be for a little while.
Yeah, for a little while. So thank you for hanging in there. Dr. Cherry, anything else?
No, I'd like to also commend Ms. Whitley today. However, just so that you're aware, she just successfully defended her dissertation, so she will soon to be Dr. Whitley. And as you can see by her work, she knows how to write a dissertation. You guys saw it. Highly recommend that we approve. To me, one of the probably the most top quality asynchronous plans that the state has seen, in my opinion. So
Awesome. May I have a motion, please?
President Ferris, I make a motion to accept the asynchronous learning plan as submitted to TEA and presented by Ms. Whitley tonight.
Mr. Regan, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Andrews? Johnson? Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And if you're not, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on then to item 15, consideration and possible approval of professional contract personnel as discussed in closed session. May I have a motion?
Mr. Ferris, I make a motion the board approve the professional contract personnel as presented.
And Mr. Carroll made a motion. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Consideration of possible, number 16, consideration of possible approval regarding ratification of employment of professional contract personnel as discussed in closed session. May I have a motion?
Mr. Ferris, I move that we approve the ratification of professional contracts discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Carroll. I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Number 17, consideration and possible approval regarding authorizing the superintendent to negotiate agreements with the state of Texas, acting by and through the Texas Department of Transportation, the state as discussed in closed session for the potential sale of 20 ISD real estate property near North Forney High School, described as 2.5 acres out of the heirs of Samuel Smith survey, abstract number 450, Kaufman County, Texas. Once finalized, authorizing the board president to execute the deeds, agreements, and any other documents necessary to effect the conveyance of the property to the state. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Ferris, I make a motion to authorize the superintendent to negotiate agreements with the state of Texas as presented in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Dobbs? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I hear none. You'll see there under announcements, future dates and meetings, October 12th, October 16th, for Uniball that is during fall break, so notice those 2 days. And then on the 26th, we have a regular board workshop, and November 2nd, regular board meeting, and then November 17th, a special call board meeting. Are there any other comments or things we can share? Terry, anyone say about this?
Sure, we have a few little items for you guys to take home tonight. I hope you noticed what's in the package is with the new logos and also a t-shirt. Thanks to Kristen and her team for getting those for us. But we also gave you some stickers just to remind everybody about our Hope Handoff and our 100 Days of Hope. Yard signs are on their way, and this week, and we will get those in your yards and in your hands. But you also have stickers that we encourage you to go tag somebody and hand off a little hope, and then tag them with a sticker that hopefully they'll pass on to others. So that's what stickers are about as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sterry. It is now 8:53 p.m. and we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.